we're going here. I can start it if you guys want. What do you think?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin here. Three of us. We got Forrest Total, Gen Z BTC, and Dan from Bitcoin Reactions. What do you guys want to get started with? I mean, this week's been absolutely crazy with Bitcoin.
Is
I
there
guess
anything that we can't? I feel like there's only one option, right?
yeah,
After everything that's been happening today.
I think you're
So,
right.
I mean, how do you guys feel about, let's say what it is. Forrest, how would you describe what happened today as a not American?
Well, the U.S. president has pumped some bags. That's what I've seen. Trump posted on Truth Social about a crypto strategic reserve, I think is his words. We actually have the tweet here. I can bring it up. And yeah, I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on this? This is what they've posted here. U.S. crypto reserve will elevate this critical industry after years of corrupt attacks by the Biden administration, which is why my executive order on digital assets directed the presidential working group to move forward on a crypto strategic reserve that includes XRP, Sol, and ADA. I will make sure the U.S. is the crypto capital of the world. We are making America great again. And he retweeted or retruthed with, and obviously BTC and ETH as other valuable cryptocurrencies will be the heart of the reserve. I also love Bitcoin and Ethereum.
So, first question that I have for you two. Are any of you guys actually surprised by this?
No, unfortunately.
Yeah, not really.
Very sad, but.
So it's interesting, right? So my perspective is that exactly, I'm not surprised either. And the reason why I'm not surprised is because how many weeks ago did he create his own crypto shitcoin?
It was like a couple days before January 20th when he was inaugurated, like literally like 3 days before. So 17th, I guess.
Before that, he has his own history with NFTs. I think they were on Solana or Ethereum. I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
And then when you add into the fact that David Sachs has a huge involvement with a lot of the companies that he specifically mentioned, he was an early investor in Sol. He was I don't know if he was an early investor in Cardano and Ripple, but I think he still has major holdings in them.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a VC, you're gonna pick up a lot of crypto stuff during that whole ICO era, right? Like, that was like they were getting those tokens instead of equity, and they were doing like there's clips from the All In podcast where David Sachs is trying to like talk to Chamath about buying his Sol, right? It's OTC type deals, which happens all the time with private equity, right? Before shares go public, you can trade private shares back and forth, and there's market for it. But with crypto VC, it's like there's a market immediately upon the creation of these tokens. So yeah, I mean, it's incentives, right? Like everyone around Donald Trump, in my opinion, they're all shitcoiners. It's like people have talked, oh, this is our first or the first Bitcoin president. No, it's the first crypto president. And this is all just par for the course, in my opinion.
Yeah. Go for it.
I feel the same way. Again, pretty much he did a bailout of the crypto industry. I've got some numbers right here. Bitcoin's up 8.6%, ETH up 11.75, XRP 31, Solana 21, Cardano 68. I know the bag holders got to be happy about that one, and again, even Peter Schiff knows, and we can pull up that tweet next. Peter Schiff is literally saying, hey, I kind of understand the meaning of a Bitcoin strategic reserve since it's digital gold, but why do we have a strategic reserve of these American-based companies? Some of them are based out of the EU, because I believe XRP actually originated in Europe. But either way, we're using these centralized coins that have really no true utility, and people are going to continue to find this out. And I think one of the benefits of this whole thing is that people are going to continue to realize firsthand that there's Bitcoin and there's everything else. So even with a reserve of all this other garbage mixed into Bitcoin, you're going to find that Bitcoin's the only one that's continuing to eat all the other random ship coins, as we call them. I believe it was Saifedean Moose or maybe Natalie Brunell on Twitter who said that this is the equivalent of making a really, really nice homemade spaghetti and then just pouring a bunch of store brand ketchup into it, and then mixing it up. You're ruining it, so it is what it is.
Yeah,
But
and
you
then
got
I
the ketchup
think,
right behind you, though, man.
yeah, I think
Come on, this is for
safe,
burgers, not for spaghetti.
I think Safety responded to that saying that it wasn't spaghetti, that Bitcoin wasn't spaghetti. It was like a nice Wagyu steak.
Yeah.
No, but this is really unfortunate. But I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. One of the big things that I feel, and I feel like this, Forrest, we talked about this the other day, but the United States is really more of a kleptocracy than anything else. It's a society that's run by thieves and scammers, and we're kind of in the golden age of grift. So this, unfortunately, is totally par for the course. So what I'm curious now is, how does this actually set itself up? Is the United States going to be printing new dollars to be buying all these different cryptos? Are we going to do it some other way? I know in Cynthia Lummis's bill, the whole point was to sell gold, or at least like sell gold certificates in order to pay for new Bitcoin buys. How do you think this is going to work itself out?
It would just have to be speculation at this point. I imagine we'll probably hear a little bit more about how this will actually get created at the crypto summit that's supposed to happen on, I believe, on the 7th of March. So next Friday, I think, or something like that. But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways they could do it. I mean, they could literally, they could tax other things. They could use like even the tariffs are an additional tax, right? Like maybe they could use part of that to fund different parts of their strategic crypto reserve, or maybe even put that into their sovereign wealth fund. Maybe these things commingle. I don't know. Like, I don't really have a good answer for that question, to be honest, because it does seem like, yeah, where does the funds come? I mean, maybe they'll just maybe they'll just tell Garlic House and Charles to just give them to them. Like, what does it matter to them, right? It costs them nothing to get XRP and ADA. Just take it by force. I mean, why not? Like, it's literally nothing.
How pissed off would you guys be if the money from the tariffs ended up going to Ripple?
I mean, I just don't see that happening. Like the whole point of XRP is kind of diminished since we now have stable coins. XRP was invented in a time where there was no USDT or USDC. And even if they were to use Ripple for whatever reason, one, you're just adding more friction to the transaction because you have to transfer from whatever money. Let's just say you're taxing the EU. You go from euros to XRP to then send the XRP to the United States and then just turn it into dollars. We've been doing cross-border payments without the advent of XRP since like the dawn of online banking. So that's the first thing. Secondly, again, if they use XRP, you're not holding it for a long time. You're buying it literally to sell it into whatever your local currency is. So the price wouldn't even really, the volume would be higher, but the price wouldn't really appreciate for that reason. XRP appreciates based on hype. And, they hire a lot of little influencers on TikTok mostly. And that's really all that is. I'm more curious about what you guys think. What will the percentage breakdown be? So let's put it this way. We're going to go ahead with the crypto asset reserve. It's going to be 60% BTC, 10% XRP, 10% ETH. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think that looks like? Because I personally think that they're going to go like maybe 60, 70% BTC, which is crazy, and then the rest of it's going to be a bunch of different ship coins, meme coins, trash coins, scam coins. Even Brian Armstrong, he's the CEO of the crypto casino Coinbase. I'm pretty sure he just recently came out saying it probably makes sense to make a Bitcoin only reserve. I'm not sure if that was a tweet or what it was. I saw it on the BTC Times, and even the guy who's running the casino said, hey, maybe we shouldn't be gambling with all this other stuff. You know what I mean? Maybe it makes sense to use the only proof of work, cryptocurrency that actually has a fair distribution, and that represents property rights for 8 billion people. Maybe we should do that instead of adding,
Do you think that tweet by Brian Armstrong is basically just showing that he understands that what he's doing is just rugging people by promoting all these other cryptos?
Yes. 100%. Like he's not dumb. Like you can really look at him. He looks like Professor Xavier from the X-Men. You know what I mean? He's got a big chrome. You don't have a small brain with a head that big. So this guy knows what he's doing. He's running an amazing casino, and casinos are very profitable operations. You make money on every transaction, a buy or a sell. And, they're also adding more financial products. They're probably going to let people loan against their Bitcoin, all sorts of different stuff. But Brian is probably going to start doing, because Coinbase is a public company, he's probably going to start doing the MicroStrategy strategy, and when he does do that, he's not going to sell convertible bonds to then buy XRP or Cardano. He's going to buy Bitcoin because he knows that that's the only thing that actually has a lot of real value.
Yeah.
By 62% of the entire market.
It's interesting because we're seeing so much blowback from people like Brian Armstrong, even who most Bitcoiners, I think, would consider as a Bitcoin enemy with the way he runs Coinbase and the things that he says. So even these people that most like diehard Bitcoiners think are pretty bad are giving a lot of blowback to this crypto reserve. So if anything, maybe that's a silver lining. Maybe that's like a little bit of hope that it won't be as bad as we think. But I have no idea what the percentage breakdown is going to be. Do you want to take a guess for us?
Yeah, I think likely it would be maybe the top 10 cryptos they're going to put in there with emphasis on American-made crypto and Bitcoin. And it'll be market cap maybe heavier to BTC than just regular market cap weighted, but something like that. And my reasoning for that is because they've shown some favoritism, or Trump has, with the tweet, right? With just talking about 5 different cryptocurrencies. But I think if they actually really decide, like, okay, we're going to buy this amount of this thing, then people are really going to there's going to be more pushback to that, because it's more like market manipulation. It's like favoritism for certain assets that are private, or, somewhat private or whatever. So if they just say, oh, it's just market weighted, then that they kind of wash their hands clean of that. So that would be my opinion just going into this. Of course, just speculation. I'd be curious though to hear, Dan, you asked the question, but I'd be curious to know your answer for how they're going to fund this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So there's a couple different options that I see. And one of the options that I think at least has a little bit of potential is that they don't buy any more Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, or any of those, right? All they do is take the stuff that they're confiscating from places like the Silk Road or whatever, and they just decide to keep it. And the reason why Trump tweeted that was maybe to help pump the bags of the people that gave him money. That would probably be a very easy way for him to feel like he's giving back to we'll call them the crypto scammers that are giving him lots of money without having to do much. So that's a possibility. It could be that it's being funded by the tariffs. That would kind of be a worst case scenario. Even buying Bitcoin with tariffs, I'm not even sure that would be a good thing.
I don't think so. I don't think it would be a good idea either. It was just something I threw out there because I don't have a good answer for it. But I think you might be onto something with the seized crypto, because oftentimes, I mean, we're dialed into like Bitcoin, right? And it is the lion's share of the seized crypto digital asset. There's a lot more seized Bitcoin than anything else, but they do have a lot of seized ETH and other cryptocurrencies. So they could just move that from the Department of Justice to some sort of new treasury type position and call it a day. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that they're acquiring anything else. Like there hasn't explicitly been said that yet.
And if that were the situation, I wouldn't really be unhappy about it if the United States government steals some or acquires some shit coin and decides to keep it forever, fine. I really couldn't care less. The big thing that I think is really important is that if the United States is going to try to acquire something as a strategic reserve or with a strategic purpose, there's only one cryptocurrency that has a strategic purpose, and that's Bitcoin. So
Totally.
yeah.
So I got a question for you guys. Do you think that this last week's price, drawdown, the shakeout before the pump, do you think that was partially orchestrated to knowing that there was going to be this pump, or this tweet by the president, who's the most influential person in the market, knowing that was going to happen, or was that tweet a response to the lowered price action?
If I had to guess, and I have no idea, but if I had to just guess, I would say that the tweet was more likely to be a response to the price action. What do you think, Jen?
I personally don't think it would be either, but I'll give you my opinion. So I think that the price action was a drive of global liquidity. Unfortunately, it's been going down. And if we look at like the 70-day and the 40-day lag, it kind of tends to follow that. Another part of it is short-term holders, people who bought over 100,000. They're just not as educated as they need to be. They buy things without learning about them. They get scared. They panic. The fear and greed index was below 10, which is crazy, by the way. Awesome buying opportunity for the few of us that do get it. And in terms of the pump that came afterwards, if anything was orchestrated, I think that the fact that Cardano and all these other coins went up so much, I saw some tweets talking about how there were some whales who were doing 50x leverage on Bitcoin, 50x leverage on Solana, hours before the tweet came out. Then the tweets come out. You want to talk about maybe something weird going on in the market. I'm not saying I know for sure, but if I had to guess, maybe Eric Trump or someone was able to be like, hey, Dad, before you send that tweet out, let me make sure I set my positions. Okay, go ahead, send it. So I wouldn't be surprised in terms of what these guys will do for a quick buck.
So if that's the scenario, do you think we should be expecting another rug pull for those coins in the near future?
There's always going to be a rug pull for those coins. I mean,
It's a more dramatic rug pull, I guess.
Yeah, dude, I don't know, dude. At the end of the day, I think what we're going to see is slowly, like usual, just slow trends down in all these other alts. Anyone that's watching this, the truth is, because a lot of people always try to do gotchas. Altcoins will probably outperform Bitcoin in the short run. You know what I mean? Like, look at them today. Yeah, they're outperforming. Because their market caps are a lot smaller, so it's easier for them to outperform. But in the long run, if you price them in Bitcoin, they're going to continue to get smoked. So my challenge to you is come back in 4 years, compare the price in Bitcoin, priced in Bitcoin, and then we'll see what's up.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but I know all of those coins that he just mentioned 4 years ago. If you look at the price in Bitcoin, they've been tanking nonstop, every single one. I think the best performing is like maybe Solana, and I think that's down like 60% or something like that.
Yeah, it's the people use this analogy of like Bitcoin being a perfect battery where nothing leaves the system, and how fiat is like a leaky battery. There's like a small leak, and it leaks all the way to like almost nothing, right? And crypto is just the same as fiat in that same way. If it's not as sound of money as Bitcoin, which it's not because of all the different principles, different aspects that make Bitcoin perfect sound money, and the crypto equivalents don't have that. It just continues to leak energy as well. And the difference between something that doesn't leak energy and something that does, even if it's a tiny percent, is infinite in the long term. So it just takes time, but all these things trend to zero against Bitcoin.
Yeah, and they've been trending to zero since pretty much the time that they started. So
yeah.
Yeah, wow. I'm just still flabbergasted by how bad or how insane this news is. Do you think there's going to be any political pushback from any of Trump's followers?
Trump's followers, probably not. Obviously from the other side. Yeah. But actually from like the mainstream media and from the other side, I haven't seen a lot of pushback against like even the meme coin and stuff. I think they just kind of take it with stride and focus on other aspects. Like, I don't know. Have you guys seen any pushback against his crypto stance? I haven't really
I
seen any
have.
of it.
So I actually did a video on that. So there
Okay.
was a MSNBC video that I reacted to. It was Stephanie Rule talking with Guy Fawkes and some other guy. And they were talking about how bad the crypto reserve idea was in the first place. And their big explanation of why it was bad was because Hawk to a coin was a scam. So they said that if Hawk to a coin was a scam, then a Bitcoin strategic reserve bill was also going to be a scam. And right, it doesn't make sense. It's like, I think the analogy that I gave is it's saying that you need to cancel Diddy Kong from Donkey Kong, the video game, because P. Diddy is not a good character anymore. So
Just name association.
yeah, it has nothing. One has nothing to do with the other. So there was definitely a lot of pushback on the left for that, and I think that a lot of the people that were giving the pushback for that, one, they don't understand the differences between all the different cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. To them, they think it's all the same, and then two, just the way that politics works in the United States, at least. Whenever person on the one side does anything, person on the other side has to say it's bad, regardless if they believe it or not. So the question that, or one of the things I think we should probably discuss for everyone, in case they don't understand the difference between why Bitcoin reserve could be a good idea, but a shitcoin reserve is really a bad idea. Do you guys want to explain the differences really quick of what the difference is between Bitcoin and all these other different cryptocurrencies?
You want to take that one?
Sure. The truth is we can't do it in one video. Understanding the difference between Bitcoin and crypto is going to take you a long time to understand. So you taking what I'm about to say is me doing all the work for you, when Bitcoin is really about doing your own proof of work. But with that being said, long story short, Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency that one has the first mover advantage because it's the discovery of digital scarcity, and you can't discover something twice. So that's the first thing. Secondly, there's no CEO, there's no issuer, there's no head, there's no headquarters, there's no roadmap, there's no marketing team, there's no PR team, there's no any of that, because this is not a company, this is not a tech monopoly. Bitcoin represents the ability to store your economic energy over time periods, right? And when I say economic energy, think about the adage, time is money. You literally work for money, which is time, which is why you get paid an hourly. Some of you might be saying, well, I get paid a salary. Well, you get paid a salary per year, which is still time. Okay. And either way, you're trying to use your time in order to create value. You receive value from your employer or your customers or your clients or whatever. Bitcoin is the only thing that allows us to store our value over time because there is no decay. All right. It's resistant to entropy. Right. So now we're going a little bit deeper, but long story short, other cryptos cannot do this. They have other leaders. They have people who can change the code very easily. They're much more centralized. Decentralized proof of work is the only way that we can utilize a cryptocurrency to the advantage of the individuals. Right. Anything else is just a charade.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really well put. I think as far as thinking about it as like a strategic asset as well, the game theory begins to play out and how nations are position themselves against each other starts to begin to be something to look into. Again, a very deep topic, something you might want to read up on, watch lots of things on. And I love what you you said there at the beginning about having to explain. You're doing the work for somebody else. I get that all the time in my comment section. Hey, tell me why Bitcoin's better than anything else. It's like, bro, I have hundreds of videos. Go watch them. I'm not replying to your comment about this. But yeah, so if say a nation starts acquiring Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is a decentralized network, it is a payment system that no one central organization controls, and it allows people to transact something that they have that the entire global market has given value to, which is Bitcoin. So that allows them to transact outside of the Swift network, for instance. So then the idea of capital controls don't necessarily work. And if other nations begin acquiring Bitcoin, it's advantageous for you to do so as well in a defensive way, so that you can also participate or have some sort of say. This especially comes true not just on acquiring Bitcoin, but even acquiring hash power. Maybe a nation's starting to mine Bitcoin, and having some say on the network in that way, as far as what kind of transactions get through and all this. So all of that starts to become strategic in a defense system, in my opinion. Based on, it allows you to transact and exchange goods nation to nation without using US dollars, or without having to trust any nation's currency, because it's borderless and it doesn't have one central issuer. It is just a protocol that is open to anybody.
Yeah, well put. And I guess I'll just add on really quickly that the way that I think about it, if I could sum it up into one word, is that all these other different cryptocurrencies, they are designed to make the people in charge of them rich. Bitcoin is designed to be a neutral asset. So the one word of how Bitcoin is different is its neutrality. It's all these other coins are designed to help specific parties. Bitcoin is the only one that acts, in this case, kind of like gold. Gold is a neutral asset where it doesn't matter who you are, how rich you are, anything in the world, it's going to treat everyone the same way. Bitcoin is like that too. So if there's only a limited amount of Bitcoin, as you were saying, you want to get it, because unlike the dollar, nobody can just print more of it. So for those reasons, and probably a zillion others, Bitcoin just is fundamentally different than every other cryptocurrency in existence.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
one more thing I'll add on to that really quick is that especially Americans, I feel like we get very caught up in thinking that, maybe just the entire of the Western world, we get caught up in thinking we're the only ones that exist and we're the main characters. From the aspect of a country that is maybe a little bit smaller, like El Salvador, anyone in the Middle East, it makes a lot more sense to use a strategic Bitcoin reserve, because what you're doing is you are subverting the power away from the big bullies like the IMF and like the United States. So that way you're not locked out of the economic game, so to speak. There's going to come a point where a lot of smaller countries start adopting Bitcoin on a massive scale, because they don't want to be sanctioned by anyone else. They don't want to be subject to someone else's currency, where they don't have any say so in how much they print, which then debases their currency against theirs. There's a point where the peso is pegged to the dollar. Now the peso is basically worth nothing against the dollar. There is a point where so many different currencies are trying to be pegged to the dollar. But instead of trying to peg your currency to some other foreign country's asset, and getting their debt dumped onto you, you can enter into a different system. You can opt out of that other system, where you're no longer being pushed around and being told what to do economically. Instead, you're taking control of your own economic future. And that's allowing you to kind of build out your own future. El Salvador is a good example of this. They had such a great surplus that they were able to pay everyone's water bill for the month of, I believe it was January or February. Either way, that's an amazing feat. And it's because they have so much extra money that the government's actually giving back to the individuals in their country. When has that ever happened? So I think that's super awesome. Bitcoin's going to be a tool for countries to run a surplus, not deficits.
Yeah, I guess that's really interesting that you just brought up El Salvador. They're kind of the counter example of what the United States is doing right now, where they are full Bitcoin reserve and they are buying it actively. Did you guys see what just happened with them this week?
Yeah, the irregularity of their buying. That's actually been going on for a little while. the full confirmation of the IMF deal has gone through. But what else besides
Yeah,
that is
so
going on?
apparently, so Backstep, I think most people probably already know, but El Salvador started buying Bitcoin. They became the Bitcoin first country. And then they created this deal with the IMF very recently where they were going to get a loan from the IMF. And in return, they were going to make Bitcoin no longer legal tender. Even though it still works as legal tender, it's no longer officially legal tender. But then, as soon as that happened, El Salvador stopped buying Bitcoin. And everyone thought that this was a result of the new IMF deal that they had in place. And there were even a handful of tweets that showed that the that one of the stipulations on the new IMF deal was that El Salvador was going to stop buying Bitcoin. And people like me were pretty upset with that. But it just turned out, I think yesterday or the day before, El Salvador started buying Bitcoin again. So I don't know if this is a giant slap in the face to the IMF, but it is showing that, exactly what Gen Z was saying. When a country like El Salvador or any country decides to go all in on Bitcoin, they start to get a surplus and can do things like pay their entire country's water bill. How cool would it be if the United States or Canada were able to pay for all of our electricity bills or something like that? Like that would be really, really cool.
I've been following the El Salvador pretty closely, and so when the IMF like when that deal started to get offered, there was quite a bit of pushback from like the Bitcoin community, and there was actually an increase in buying. So instead of one Bitcoin one day, they bought 10 Bitcoin. So there was like a huge, like if you look at this, it used to be this perfect stair step. Then all of a sudden there was a huge jump. And then a little while ago, then there was a big pause. They didn't buy Bitcoin for 8 days, and then they bought a big chunk of Bitcoin again. And in the IMF loan, there was like an initial offer, and then they, clarified and really like dialed everything in before finalizing it. And it actually says that the IMF is going to restrict the government purchases of Bitcoin in the deal. And yet they're still buying Bitcoin. But in my opinion, and there's some other people speculating this as well, that this could just be private Bitcoin wallets that are linked to that are government wallets, but aren't actually the visible public address that we're all seeing when we look at that. And they're moving that already bought Bitcoin into there to make it look like they're buying Bitcoin. But I think that it's not all sunshine and roses with the Bitcoin situation over at El Salvador. Like obviously it is in a way of them having bought this asset for much lower than it's worth now, and it's looks very good on their balance sheet and everything. But it seems like they kind of took. I mean, it's a little early to say, but it looks like they took that deal, the 1.3 billion. I hope it does wonders for the country, but it looks to me like they're stepping back from Bitcoin.
So if you were Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, do you think you would have taken that deal?
I mean, I don't. It's very hard for me to say because I've never been a president of an entire nation before. You
Maybe the
know,
better question is, do you know what the point of that deal was? Like how much money they were given? Do you know any of the terms? Are any of those public?
yeah. So I know that it's 1.3 billion dollars. The details are public. I believe the interest rate is public, but it's an interest rate loan over a certain amount of time. Oftentimes with loans, people will just refinance at a certain point anyway, or like get another loan basically to pay off the other loan. That's very typical with nations. But yeah, I don't have except the actual amount. I don't have the exact details, but it's
E-
1.3 billion.
Except for the actual interest rate amount, you're saying?
No, except the actual total amount of loan that they're getting. I don't know the details. So the total loan that they're getting is 1.3 billion US.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure it'd be worth it to do that as a country. So I'm wondering if there was any other extenuating circumstances that were part of that deal as well that we're not privy to. I know the United States
Maybe.
has a pretty big history of we'll call it having a heavy hand of influence in South America and Central America.
They do, yeah, and the IMF does as well. I mean, the IMF is responsible for funding uh, tyrannical governments, like straight up giving money to people that oppress their citizens. I'm not saying that's happening in El Salvador. I think what Bukele has done has been largely very positive for the nation and for the individuals, the vast majority of individuals in their country. I see it as a great success story, what he's done there. But the IMF is a terrible organization if you look at their history.
Have
In
you
my
read the
opinion.
book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman?
No, I haven't.
Have you, Genzi? So basically, this book is from a guy who worked for the IMF, and he was explaining the details about how they worked. But for anyone that doesn't know, what happens is that the way that the deals are structured, or the way that deals start happening with the IMF, is the United States will basically figure out, we need resource A or we need resource B. And they'll find a country with one of these resources or with heavy amounts of these resources. And they will then go to that country and offer, we'll call it a sweetheart deal of dollars that needs to be paid back in dollars. And for the United States, this is really easy to do because they can just print up, we'll say $1.3 billion. The United States could print that up immediately and it's like nothing. And then they give it to El Salvador. And then once they give it to El Salvador, usually there's a lot of stipulations on it. So let's say they wanted to build a bridge or a nuclear power reactor. What would happen is the American companies would come in and get all the contracts to build that nuclear power reactor, so that all the money would end up getting funneled back to the United States anyways. And the resources that they're trying to get would be privatized. So it would make usually one or two people in that country really, really wealthy, and everyone else would be really, really poor. So the whole point is that what you're saying, that the IMF is a really bad organization, that's how they're a bad organization. And what they're doing is really just ravaging third world countries left and right. So I'm a little bit disappointed that Nayib Bukele even talked to them in the first place. I feel like there had to have been something else going on.
I think so too, kind of. I mean, yeah, it's, I mean, the reason I say that I don't know what I would have done is because it's a loan for $1.3 billion. I mean, that's a lot of money. Maybe he plans to do something that will outperform the interest on that loan and outperform the stipulations that come with it, and ends up being really positive. So I refrain from saying too much disparaging things, except that the IMF is not an organization I would trust or personally, or, just, from the outside either want to be involved with at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very understandable. My take on this is that I'm sure Bukele has a plan. He's a pretty smart guy. He's been doing the right things. And as a Bitcoiner, I definitely trust his discernment. But one thing is that he's the president of El Salvador. He's not necessarily the president of Bitcoin. So doing what's important for his country makes sense. Perhaps with that money, I know that they have a lot of gold underneath their feet. He was talking about mining the gold, selling the gold, maybe using that in order to fund a lot of the operations. I believe that their Bitcoin stack currently is going to outperform the loan, by a lot. So I'm sure it's not something that's like, oh, you need to pay us back in 2 years. These loans are, I'm assuming they're pretty long loans. Like when it comes to countries, they probably operate in decades. Maybe by the end of the decade, you'll have to pay back a certain amount. And by the end of the decade, I mean, things are going to be a lot different in terms of the size of their holdings in proportion to dollars. Again, I don't know if there's different things that maybe like a loophole almost in the contract where they might be able to use some of that money to buy Bitcoin. Maybe specifically they cannot use the money they were given to buy Bitcoin. I don't really know, but either way, I think that for El Salvador, such a tiny country, $1.4 billion, 1.3 billion is such a hefty amount that the potential benefit to the citizens is so huge that you cannot turn a blind eye to that. And again, their Bitcoin holdings is big enough to supplement that loan. The tourism industry is exploding. El Salvador is becoming one of the greatest countries in the world, and they're so tiny, that they are really showing up on a global stage right now. So I trust Bukele. Pretty sure he's going to get it done. Whatever he uses that money for, it'll be positive impact on the country and for all of El Salvadorians. And the fact that Bitcoin's no longer a legal tender, people can still use it, they can still accept it, they can still transact in it, and they can still pay whoever accepts it for it. So the Bitcoin economy is going to continue to grow in El Salvador. It already is not too big, if we're going to be honest. I've seen a couple of documentaries. It's really not the biggest thing, but giving people the option, the freedom of choosing whether or not to accept or utilize Bitcoin and create those on ramps and off ramps, I think that's going to be really fulfilling that libertarian vision. So I support it.
Well put, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bitcoin's going to win out in the free market anyway. It doesn't need to be dictated on high that it's legal tender, or that their laws actually made it so that it was mandatory that businesses accept Bitcoin, which a lot of them just didn't. They just didn't build out the infrastructure for it or whatever. They just didn't care enough, and it wasn't enforced. And it shouldn't have been enforced, really, because again, this is an open source project. It's really the only free market we've ever seen, and Bitcoin will win in the end. And I think, everything you said there was perfect. Well said.
Exactly. Bitcoin is going to win in the end. I think the other thing that I want to talk about, and I want to get your guys' opinion on, was really this crash. I think we touched on it a little bit, but I think one of you two said that the fear and greed index was like 10, which is like at an all-time low. How are you guys feeling about that? Like when it was happening?
I
You wanna take
was,
that one?
yeah, and this is just me personally. All right, not everyone has to share my opinion, but anytime that Bitcoin's red, I'm pissed off. Because even though I'm not selling it for like ever, really, it's my whole thing is like, well, it should already be at like 10 million, but the fact that people don't get it is kind of irritating. And then seeing the fear and greed index being lower than during a bear market, it just pisses me off, dude. I'm like, what are you kids doing, man? What did you think this was? Did you think that this was a get rich quick scheme? Did you think this was a pump and dump? Who told you to get into this thinking that it was going to go to like 1 million in like 2 days, and then it goes down 10%? You're like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm selling all my coins. Like, dude, we got to stop selling our coins to BlackRock. We got to stop selling our coins to Michael Saylor. You know what I mean? This is ridiculous. So I personally was slightly upset. And I just bought more, but
what was the lowest you got it at?
I got it at, I believe, 81. I tried sniping it. I was like, there's no way it goes sub 80. Of course it goes sub 80. I have no more money left. My paychecks are looking tiny. You know what I'm saying? It's just a tragedy. But that's what we get for trying to time the market, And the longer that you're in Bitcoin, you start to realize it's about time in the market. My DCA is still set for every day, so I'm never missing too many dips. But when I smash buy, I always just barely miss the bottom, So one day I'll catch the exact bottom one day.
81. That's legend numbers right there. That's really, really good. I think I got 83.
Yeah, I got the worst there. I got 85 before I ran out of fiat. I was pissed, but for a different reason. I was pissed because I got a car maintenance bill. I got rents due. My fiat stack is too low to hit this dip too hard. But yeah, I bought a little bit of spot Bitcoin, and on Friday I also loaded up on some Mara share. Or no, yeah, no, it was pre earnings, so it would have been Tuesday, I guess. I bought a bunch of Mara as well, which I'm very happy about. So
how is Mara doing? So I'm hearing all about it. I know it's the next MicroStrategy, but I haven't looked into it too deeply.
The miners, I don't know. I have a love-hate for them. I think they're ultimately not as good of a business as MSTR is, as strategy is, because it's very capex, heavy business. It takes a long time to get the payoff of investing in energy sites, in miners, in warehousing. All of that takes a long time to pay out, and there's only so much Bitcoin left, to be mined. But Mara has a large stack, and if you look at their ratio, basically their MNAV, which is one way to evaluate these companies, their MNAV was way lower than any of these other companies, and their earnings were coming up. They were adopting FASB, and they smoked their earnings, absolutely smoked them. And I had a feeling they were going to do that, so I loaded up a bit beforehand. And they have a respectable stack. And I think for me, it was just the difference in what the market was basically. The MNAV is one way to evaluate basically like the future growth of a company. Are they going to be able to grow beyond their current stack of Bitcoin? And with that MNAV being so low, I was like, of course they are. Of course they're going to get more Bitcoin. They're mining Bitcoin actively. They have a HODL strategy. They've done convertible notes in the past. It might make sense for them to do it in the future. They're going to acquire a ton more Bitcoin. This makes no sense that they're so close to trading one-to-one assets with their Bitcoin holdings.
So you're pretty invested into Mara. Are you also invested into Mara, Gen Z?
No, I got rid of all of my mining stocks maybe like 2023, only because I started to understand what MicroStrategy was. And for me, I'm always just trying to play it kind of safe and just ironically put all of my eggs into one basket and just watch the basket very, very, very closely. So MicroStrategy, Bitcoin, Marathon, HUD 8, they're all down a lot over the 3-month chart. But the rebound is going to be very amazing. And I think that MicroStrategy it's just too fast for these other companies to catch up. It's too on the radar. Too many people are eyeing it. Too many people are shorting it, and too many people are going to be buying it at once it starts to take off once again, following the Bitcoin price action. Same with the global liquidity stuff. I believe that once we start seeing another rally in all markets, the S&P, the QQQ, the Bitcoin market, we're going to watch strategy is just going to be faster, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens.
So it's interesting because
I agree with you there.
Yeah, I know you guys are both big into MicroStrategy, and I feel like most of Twitter, or X now, is into MicroStrategy. I don't want to out myself too much, but I think I'm the only one that's not invested in it. And I'm unconvinced. So I know this is supposed to be more about news, but can you guys give me like your 30-second spiel of why you think MicroStrategy or Mara or either of those is such a good investment over Bitcoin? Because nobody's been able to explain it to me yet in a way that's been convincing.
I would recommend watching MSTR True North. Those guys, I mean, maybe some of the hardest working people in the strategy space, for sure. They cracked the code. They saw what was literally written on the walls, pretty obvious. But I didn't see it until I really got them to break it down. My little spiel would be that my portfolio is obviously mostly Bitcoin, some MSTR, but MSTR grows so quickly that it gets bigger than my Bitcoin holdings, which then allows me to purchase more Bitcoin. MicroStrategy.
Did you sell your MSTR to get more Bitcoin?
Not yet, but that is my plan. I'm planning to do that because I have a lot of options on strategy. You can't hold them forever. They will expire in December. But I've been buying them for so long. They're very deep in the money, but there's so much more to go. And then when that time comes, some of them I'll try to convert into shares and some I will turn into Bitcoin. But anyways, long story short, what's happening is all companies are going to do this. And what they're doing is they're recapitalizing the business on Bitcoin. So instead of a company producing value by just making products and then losing value by holding dollars, they're going to produce value by making products and then retain and grow their value by saving in Bitcoin. Strategy is just the first company to do that on a large scale. Everyone's going to do this. Apple is going to sell phones. They're going to sell software. They're going to sell everything. And they're just going to hold Bitcoin because why would you not be holding that?
So I agree with you, actually, and I totally get that every company is going to be owning Bitcoin at some point. The question that I have, and this is the reason why I haven't invested in MicroStrategy yet, is what's the point of holding a company that owns Bitcoin over holding the Bitcoin yourself?
Want me to take this one? I can take this one if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So the idea here is that it is a company as opposed to Bitcoin, right? And what do companies do? But they try to grow their company. They try to grow their earnings, and the earnings that MicroStrategy grows turns into Bitcoin. And they have all sorts of different strategies to basically wrap Bitcoin in different instruments and sell them to a captive markets with convertible bonds, with even their equity, with preferred shares, and they take all of the profits from that, and even with the dilution of their equity through these strategies, they're still increasing the Bitcoin per share. So if you looked at all of the outstanding shares of strategy and you calculated how much and you looked at all of their Bitcoin on their balance sheet and you calculated basically how much Bitcoin would be allocated to each one of those shares over time, strategy has been able to increase that metric. So if you buy, this isn't the exact numbers, but if you were to buy, one Bitcoin today, or, the equivalent, say Bitcoin's 100,000, which it will be soon. So you spend 100,000 on one Bitcoin, or you spend 100,000 on 100,000 worth of strategy shares. Over time, or so you're allocated to less Bitcoin right now because strategy has a premium on their Bitcoin holdings. They're not trading one to one like an ETF would. But over years of them acquiring more Bitcoin, that metric goes up. So you'd actually over time be allocated, or your shares would be associated with more Bitcoin than if you had just bought in Bitcoin at that exact moment.
And
That's one
what
way to
is
look
the
at it.
difference in between the amount of Bitcoin backing what's the amount of Bitcoin backing MicroStrategy per share right now?
It's their MNAV is like it's probably below 2 at this point. I haven't looked in a while. I'm just bringing up a
And while you pull
what's
that
it?
up, you could even try going on MSTR, their official website. I think they actually
Yeah,
track. So while you pull that up, my little 2 cents will also be that essentially what's happening is Bitcoin has no risk, and strategy is in they're including risk into holding Bitcoin. You know what I mean? So if you want to just save your money, then you'll just hold Bitcoin because Bitcoin has no inherent risk. Whereas strategy has inherent risk because now you're trusting the CEO, you're trusting the board, you're trusting the company, you're trusting that they'll secure their Bitcoin properly, all this good stuff. And typically, when you take on more risk, the reward is a little bit greater. On top of that, they're actually generating a cash flow because of the fact that they are an operating company. So if Bitcoin's going up 60%, strategy is going up 90% or more because they're adding on top of Bitcoin's growth rate, their own company's growth rate on top of that. And that's why it outperforms Bitcoin.
Okay,
yeah,
so I think we have these up on here. So this is saying that the stock price for MicroStrategy is $255 per share,
correct.
and how much dollars worth of Bitcoin is in it?
So your BTC per diluted share is 0.00169. So right here. So this is accounting for the estimated dilution, basically, which will end up being lowered, or ends up being based on what strategy's share price is at the time, but they just account for it right away. So this is your Bitcoin per share, but basically this NAV premium against diluted share is one thing to look at. So it costs you 1.619 times to buy at current rates if you were to buy the equivalent strategy shares as opposed to Bitcoin.
You said 1.619?
Yes. So that's the premium to their Bitcoin, basically.
And how how fast do you think that they're going to be able to get that extra 1.619
So
Bitcoin?
this is their Bitcoin yield metric. So for last year to date, their increase in Bitcoin per share was 74%. So they grew it by 3/4. And then this year so far, they're at 6.9 and their forward guidance is to increase it by 15%. I think likely they'll more than double that, the guidance. So it'd be about 30%. So if it was 30%, or if let's just do a nice even number at 33.3% Bitcoin yield for the next 3 years, it would take 3 years for you to double your Bitcoin per share.
So your expectation is that in 3 years, the amount of Bitcoin that MicroStrategy is going to have per share is going to double.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably pretty conservative. I think they could do a lot more than that. And there's a lot more to this story as well, Dan. There's the fact that they hold right now almost, they hold 499,000 Bitcoin, right? And in the future, what does holding that much Bitcoin allow somebody to do? You can tell like strategy is in their accumulation phase, but in the future, that could be collateral. That could be, they could have some sort of loan mechanism against that. They could really just do whatever they wanted because they hold a huge percentage of the world's capital. They can decide to acquire businesses. They could do all sorts of other company things, right? So this is one metric to value them. Their Bitcoin increasing, and we're all Bitcoiners. We all value Bitcoin, right? But the other fact is that they're a company that could do all sorts of things with this Bitcoin at a certain point that would also add value to the company. There's more to it as well in the fact that there's people that can't buy Bitcoin. There's people that can't buy Bitcoin ETFs, but they could buy MicroStrategy, and that will increase the price as well. MicroStrategy is in passive index funds. That's passive buyers as well. And this is all things that increase the share price. So one metric is, how much Bitcoin can they acquire, but we all also care about, maybe outperforming, or, that would be one idea of outperforming the dollar denominated performance of Bitcoin, right? So there's all these other factors that could make Strategy's share price outperform Bitcoin.
Yeah. Fascinating. Not convinced, but I think you both did an excellent job explaining that. I always see you guys talking about that, and so I figured this would be a great opportunity to just get your guys' explanations firsthand.
No, it takes time. It takes time for sure. And people will very likely look back and they'll say, dude, you were able to buy strategy for $200 something. The same way they'll say that you were able to buy Bitcoin for 91. You were able to buy it for 200,000. That's it. Oh my goodness. You're so lucky. So,
yeah, I guess my thing is, being in Bitcoin for, the better part of a decade, I've seen so many Bitcoin affinity situations, we'll call them, where, and I'm not calling Bitcoin, or I'm not calling MicroStrategy a scam by any means, but every single instance of people saying there's some sort of yield, or we're going to be able to generate more Bitcoin, it always tends to break down over time. And in general, I like the idea of holding Bitcoin. I think that's great. But, as I'm just going to say, an OG Bitcoiner, I've learned Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. No, don't let anyone else hold your keys for you.
Yeah,
So,
I mean that's an additional risk you take on, and I will say personally, the only place I hold strategy is in registered accounts, where the only other option would be stocks or Bitcoin ETFs. And the way I look at Bitcoin ETFs is I'm already taking that counterparty risk of allowing someone else to custody it. Plus, there's an expense ratio, so every year my Bitcoin per ETF share is actually going down. Whereas with strategy, if I believe in their thesis long term enough, my Bitcoin per share could go up, right? So that's as simple as I look at it in that situation.
yeah, and you can't argue with the results. It was a lot higher than it was a year ago. So,
yeah.
And I think Sailor is going to be the first one to break the curse, because Sailor really represents something way different than so many other people that we've seen before. A lot of these crypto guys who get on the cover of Forbes, they end up rugging people. They end up smoking the entire industry, honestly. And it makes a lot of sense. Everything that you're saying makes sense. It's really important to be cautionary when it comes to Bitcoin and all these people who are saying they can outperform Bitcoin, because that's a tall task. But I think the truth is the future belongs to the people who can outperform Bitcoin. There's not many of them. There will be very few, but some of them can do it. NVIDIA can outperform Bitcoin. Microsoft can outperform Bitcoin. Apple can outperform Bitcoin. They can only do this by making Bitcoin products, Bitcoin adjacent products, and by putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And we're going to see more and more of that happen. I think Similar Scientific is going to continue to do it. I think KULR is going to continue to do it. And I think that some of the miners are going to do it for a short time period. They cannot do it for a long time because it's a cutthroat business with a lot of overhead fees. But some of these other guys, like MicroStrategy, is just perfectly positioned because software has very little overhead as a business model. And then on top of that, they already have the most Bitcoin. So all they have to do is not lend it out or sell it. And I think that they're going to continue to win as long as the game is set up the way that it is.
How do you feel about Michael Saylor making more pro crypto comments recently? Have you seen those?
Yes, yes. My opinion, man, because every now and then, because even at the Republican National Convention thing when he was talking, you know, there's people literally screaming XRP and Solana or whatever. He's ignoring them when he's asked certain questions about crypto versus Bitcoin. Oh my God, my thing died, my little light. It's fine. You know, it doesn't, he never mentions any other cryptos besides the fact that he will like comment on something that Donald Trump said. Donald Trump will say, oh, we're going to build crypto in the United States. And then he'll say Bitcoin is the backbone of crypto in the United States. You know what I mean? Like, I think Michael Saylor knows that there's just Bitcoin, but he doesn't want to ruffle the feathers of any of the altcoiners. He doesn't want to give them any airtime. He doesn't want to give them any credence. He has not mentioned any other altcoins by name. You know, he just says Bitcoin is the crypto capital of the world. Bitcoin is what keeps crypto afloat or whatever. And that is true. You know,
so in your opinion, Michael Saylor speaking more favorably about Bitcoin in general or about crypto in general is a political move more than anything else?
I think so.
I think so too. So he just recently did this. It's the digital assets framework. This is from his website actually, and he presented this to. Let's see, who did he present it to?
He presented it quite a few times.
Yes, and he directly presented it to the House of Financial Services Committee and French Hill, who's the leader of that committee. And this includes a whole bunch of basically definitions in looking at definitions of all these different crypto assets, right? It's about digital assets framework. So this doesn't really even mention Bitcoin by name. He's trying to bring forward the information of what kind of things they need to look at to define and figure out the market structure of crypto. So it's kind of an interesting thing if you guys go through this, but it's you know, from like a real, you know, Bitcoiner, like a toxic Bitcoin maxi, I don't think a maxi would like create something like this. So I wouldn't necessarily consider him that. I think he's a great Bitcoin advocate, but he totally recognizes that the rest of the industry exists, that it has its place to exist, and that the market structure around it just needs to be clear and concise. So I don't think that he's like, you know, going to call all these other things shit coins at this point in his stage. I think part of it is political and part of it is like that he just, it's almost like a concession, right? Like he's like giving up this, you know, allowing all this other stuff to happen so that he can also get Bitcoin more regulation and more, you know, he's a kind of a pro regulation guy, in my opinion. I don't know. That's how I see it.
Which is the opposite of me, I think. I like the fact that Bitcoin is not regulated by the government. No, it's really interesting. I have this, you know, there's the saying, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah.
I sometimes think about that in regards to Michael Saylor. Would he shitcoin if the financial incentives were strong enough? I'm not saying he would. I'm not saying that he would, but I don't like the idea of having my money invested with anyone that could, regardless if they would or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, his knowledge, I don't know how much you've listened to him, but like he has a pretty extensive
Amount, yeah.
knowledge about money and power projection, money and, you know, the evolution and technology of money and how that's led to Bitcoin. I think I'm not sure what would ever convince someone that understands what he understands that there's value to anything else, especially in And I think he does recognize that, or he's conceded that there's value in other cryptocurrencies as some sort of other form of technology, but he's
And
never
that's
made.
another thing where I'm not convinced. I don't really see any value in any other cryptocurrencies except for Bitcoin. I understand this concept of stable coins and how they could have some temporary value right now. But if we're
Mhm.
looking at, smart contract platforms like Solana or Ethereum, we talked about that the other day, where the entire premise of smart contracts is essentially broken because they're creating these connections from the physical world to the digital world that can and will all eventually be severed.
Right. But yeah, I mean, just to play devil's advocate, I mean, even if they can be severed, though, there's still a digital footprint of something that exists physical.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And that's the question of value that I see is that still valuable? And some people might say yes. My personal answer would be no. I'm not trying to be anti master, you guys, but I really do appreciate your guys' explanations. I thought that was fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah, no worries. And again, strategy will not be for everyone, because again, you're taking on risk. If you want to take on no risk, you should just be buying Bitcoin because now you're trusting yourself. You're not trusting anyone else. And the ethos of Bitcoin is not to trust, but to verify, so
Mhm.
it makes a lot of sense, 100%. In terms of the digital asset framework that Saylor's putting out there, I think he's just trying to set the groundwork so that there's the least amount of fires that exist, because if you let like a moron like Donald Trump and his team come up with the digital asset framework, the amount of like meme coin garbage, the amount of craziness that we would see would be ridiculous. Whereas I feel like if you're allowing an engineer and his team to kind of intelligently push you or lead you into, what celebrity is allowed to make a coin, how can they make these coins, like what is the difference between a utility token, an altcoin, and a meme coin, you know what I mean, like who can be held liable for creating unregistered securities, stuff like that, so that you don't have an SEC that's just going around doing witch hunts, and you have an SEC that's actually able to, you know, do what they have to do in the industry to stop actual scammers, to stop actual fraud or actual abuse, whether it's committed by companies or by individuals, whatever that looks like. Because right now we're seeing the result of really the wild, wild west of grift, scambling. We've got Dave Portnoy making a bunch of coins and then crying and making a bunch of people poorer or whatever. And there's really no regulation around scalping or making all these crazy coins. And maybe that's okay, but you have to like state that it's okay somewhere. You know what I mean? Because otherwise you'll get a bunch of frivolous lawsuits. People will be like, hey, well, this guy scammed me on Twitter and I want to press a charge against him and blah, blah. And it's like, no, you really can't do that, because right here in section 35B it says that you have free will and you bought the coin with your free will. So you're broke. Goodbye. Like just kind of setting the standard. I don't know.
yeah. Well, we're coming from a place like, Dan, you mentioned you want less regulation and things like that. That's the place we're coming from. And I agree. Like, I think that would be great. Like I would love to use Bitcoin, no KYC, no AML. I think that would be awesome. I think all of that. But unfortunately, I mean, that's the place we were. And I see us going in the direction of more regulation. And if we're going in that direction, I would prefer people to make really smart decisions within there and be very cautious and hopefully look out for individuals, not regulatory capture, right?
Absolutely. And when I said I was anti-regulation, what I meant specifically was I was anti any regulation from any government onto the Bitcoin core network itself. That's one of the reasons why I like Bitcoin, is because it's impossible for it to be regulated by a government. In terms of Gen Z, what you were saying about regulation, about, we'll call them shit coins and rug pulls and stuff like that. I'm totally comfortable with regulation there, actually. I mean, those are, to me, they look like rug pulls and not Ponzi schemes, but pump and dumps. And if those are illegal, I'm totally comfortable with enforcing those security laws on the people pulling them off. which might be an unpopular situation because it looks like the president might be doing one of those right now. But
yeah, those will be classified as digital collectibles, and everyone will be allowed to do it. Yeah,
I saw this one thing
yeah.
where if they do classify them as digital collectibles, apparently collectibles as a whole have a much higher tax rate associated with them than securities.
Oh, really? Okay. I
Yeah,
didn't know
so
that.
maybe that'll be a win and a loss for all those people.
Yeah, I
However it
mean,
works, it's Bitcoin in the end. So
you know what? That would be one way to slow it down. Like in my opinion, the taxation of crypto at large and Bitcoin specifically has been a way for governments to slow down adoption. And whenever I try to do some merchant adoption stuff locally, and it always comes down to, okay, but there's capital gains tax on this transaction, and it's like that's a real hindrance to the idea of Bitcoin becoming a medium of exchange, which it definitely needs to become. And I think regardless, it would become that. But that's one way where the government can slow things down is with taxes. And I think they've done that with Bitcoin, in my opinion.
absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah. That's one thing they could do with meme coins, right? They could make meme coins like very hard to make money from if they just tax the hell out of it. I'm not
Imagine
advocating for
that.
that,
Yeah,
but I'm just saying.
if they made taxes. Yeah, if they made the tax rate on meme coins the same as the tax rate on like lottery winnings or game show winnings, where it's like 50% plus, that would be an
Right.
interesting thing. I'm not even sure I would be in favor of that, but it would be interesting
Yeah,
to
likewise.
discuss.
Well, guys, do we have anything else we wanted to cover? I mean, we're over an hour here. I mean, yeah, what do you guys think?
That was fantastic. I
Yeah.
think the big question that we were talking about is we should type in a comment below if you have like a good name of what you want to call us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
we'll try to do this show maybe once a week, just covering maybe like the biggest story of the week, and then touching on maybe a few other smaller things in between there. So let us know if you have an awesome name for us, anything like that. And yeah, I mean, I think it was a pretty good conversation. We covered quite a bit of stuff, But long story short, Trump is a ship coiner, and we're gonna probably see the price of Bitcoin dip a little bit after all the hype. Again, the tariffs do start tomorrow. We'll see how the markets start to react to that. I think a lot of people are still scared. There's a couple kids who were hoping to get out of their position. Now that it popped up 10%, they can get out at a not as big as of a loss, So good for them, But they're just selling the Bitcoin to me. They're selling it to Sailor. They're selling it to the big dogs. So we'll see what's up.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciated the conversation. That was lots of fun.
Yeah, I'll see you guys.
All right, everyone. See you.